Welcome to American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history, conclusions you may not necessarily agree with, but you should at least be conversant or know about these subjects and many more, and much deeper than this simple survey. This is a history for regular people who just want to know, just basic stuff and have an idea of what people are talking about on the news. Maybe they didn't pay attention in history class in school. Maybe it just wasn't interesting to them, but they have an interest now just so they can have place some of the things they've heard in context. So I'm gonna begin. We're still in FDR's administration. Roosevelt was what the people wanted, and he was reelected again and again. In his second term, since the Supreme Court had been making things difficult for what he termed his New Deal, declaring such things as AAA and the NIRA unconstitutional, he proposed legislation making the justices have a mandatory retirement at the age of 70. Horrified at this attempt to subvert the Constitution, Congress balked. FDR went to the people with his fireside chats. Excuse me, I'm very sorry about that. Um, that NIRA was the National Industrial Recovery Act, um, and let me go. The Agricultural Adjustment Act was AAA. Appreciate. I sorry about not saying what those things were. They're from yesterday. I talked about them yesterday. So horrified at this attempt to subvert the Constitution, Congress balked. FDR went to the people with his fireside chats. Under this pressure, the Supreme Court adopted a more liberal tone, upholding the rights of states to set a minimum wage and insisting that federal Social Security measures fit under the quote general welfare clause of the Constitution. As time went on, FDR was able to replace the aging Supreme Court with his own handpicked liberals and left wing socialists who eventually discarded the quote original intent of the Constitution completely. In the meantime, storm clouds were brewing internationally as God prepared to drop the hammer on this love fest of mankind, thinking they could move ever onward and upward without trusting in Him. FDR had sent an emissary to the Soviet Communist Russia, even during his campaign, to acknowledge that government, even while the Soviets were killing 10 million Ukrainians. FDR's view toward government and the USA very closely matched Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, and FDR's socialist applications of his assumed governmental powers back that up. He undermined, any action on the part of the world powers collectively to end the Great Depression, particularly by a speech he gave in 1933 to the World Monetary Conference. Germany's rise to power was accompanied by the U.S. press's growing influence. When Germany's Hindenburg exploded over Lakehurst, New Jersey, the press began its report of catastrophes in progress as families gathered around their large radios to be entertained and to hear the news. The Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan grew stronger in the 1930s. Great Britain, according to historian Carroll Quigley in his Tragedy and Hope, classic book, important history book, had helped Hitler's Germany to rebuild its navy and opposed France's efforts to hold the dictator to the Treaty of Versailles. American Wall Street financiers backed Hitler and the Nazis' rise to power. And Hitler is said to have even had pictures of Henry Ford in his office and several of Ford's books translated into German. Nazi Germany even gave Ford an award for his service to Germany in the late 30s. President George W. Bush's grandfather, was on the board of directors of a New York bank that was accused of doing business with Hitler after we had gone to war with him. So consorting with the Nazi regime was not limited to Henry Ford. FDR got Congress to relax neutrality laws to permit us to sell supplies to the enemies of Nazi Germany, however, after Hitler invaded Poland. Britain's gamble was always to support the second strongest power in continental Europe to maintain a certain balance, which explains his support of Nazi Germany over France. But this backfired against him at the start of World War II. FDR, the only president to serve more than 2 terms, was reelected for his third as Europe was embroiled in a worse war than the Great War, World War I. So we're going to continue with FDR's administration and World War II in our next time. I know you won't agree with things I say. I know my mother's generation practically worshipped FDR, and some people say he was our greatest president. I just have throwing a little salt in the water. I just want you to think about some of the things he did. And yes, he was faced with a terrible, horrible conditions that he had to start with, Great Depression and World War II. So judge for yourself, but come to your own conclusion. All right. And that's all I'm asking you to do is study American history, even if it's just to say, hey, you're wrong. This is this. So that's great. At least you have an opinion. Thank you.